Hey NAIA football fans, Corey Thorpe here with another edition of the NAIA Ball Podcast, powered by AdCraft USA, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform experts. Our friends at AdCraft have been with us for many years now. They've run web stores for us multiple times. These guys are NAIA fans and family who are experts in the apparel and merchandise world. AdCraft allows you to take the hassle out of ordering. Let their knowledgeable design and customer service staff handle everything from hosting the store online, shipping the product, and helping your customers so you can get back to the game. Find them online at adcraftusa.com. All right, NAIA football fans, this is Corey Thorpe back again with another edition of the NAIA Ball Podcast, powered by AdCraft Custom Apparel and Merch. Absolutely the best. Web stores are so well done with them. They come out with some really amazing looking pieces of clothing, and they ship it. They handle the customer service. You don't have to lift a finger. If you are a lazy bum like me and you like to get the maximum amount of return for the absolute minimum of investment, these are the dudes. They will handle everything for you like they are your personal your personal guys who pick out your own closet. They are that good. So contact them, and they can bring your merch to life. Well, Matt, it is the reigning champs of our best conference division in the NAIA. Question we'll get to at the end is, do they reign supreme at least at this point of the off season with a little bit less than halfway to go? But we will absolutely see. Have to give a shout out to our first team here, the alma mater of our friend and founder of NAIF Ball, John Cooper, going with the Faulkner Eagles, hashtag never fail. And unfortunately, it wasn't a very good season for them. It was that offense struggled, just to put it very bluntly.
Yeah, this Faulkner offense was not, and team in general was just not up to snuff with what we've seen in years past. This is a team that we've seen in and out of kind of the top 25 in recent years and been competing in the middle of this conference. Just wasn't clicking last year. An offense that totaled what, 1,600 yards throughout the entire season.
Yeah.
Not a recipe for success, but you do get the experience coming back for this team, thankfully, on the offensive side of the ball. And a lot of your defense is coming back too. Hopefully, you can get some momentum going that way.
Yeah, you really need to. I mean, it was a defense that overperformed where they were in SP Plus, the 45th ranked defense by SP Plus, while having the 63rd overall team. And in a year where defense struggled nationally, the fact that they were able to have a defense that good says a lot. You just got to have the offense to match. And you do get Emmanuel Olatane back there with 16 and a half tackles for loss. It's a nice piece to have, but you mentioned it, Matt. There's a lot coming back on this Faulkner team and under head coach Rob Gray. You got to think that with all of the other championship pieces that have occurred at Faulkner, all the red banners they've hung for basketball and baseball and all that good jazz, this is a team that in football failure is not an option.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see if they can bounce back. I think they're capable of it, but this team needs to get back to where we've seen them before, and that's competing with some of the better teams in this conference.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on to the next team, this is a team who won a football game, if I remember correctly, like 95 to 89. Set the NAIA record. Defensive coordinator did not make it through the next week, but they won the game. I've seen the football. John has it. That's absurd.
Yeah.
Well, going from that air raid kind of idea to ground and pound here, the Cumberland Phoenix, the triple option team of the South, the trivia team of the South, honestly.
Love some trivia football. I'm sure everybody's seen the 222-0 blanking by Georgia Tech on this Cumberland team, what, like a century ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but this is not the team of old that would be dealing with that. Very good season for Cumberland last year, and I think that they have a lot of good things to work with. This was also a team who, in SP Plus defensively, was outstanding last season. Absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, and and that was following a good effort last season. They were actually up 14 spots overall in SP Plus, including I believe, a 23 spot increase on their offensive side. It's a team who almost hit parity, and you know, at 5-5, almost hitting parity tells me that you might have actually overperformed that 500 record.
Absolutely. Yeah, and not to mention that they have a lot of pieces coming back on the offensive side of the ball, which is where you're struggling. Obviously, with the triple option, once it clicks, but sometimes getting there can take some time. I understand it. I've seen it. But when you have an all-conference offensive lineman coming back, you have your quarterback back. It's a recipe for success.
Yeah, and they have all of their offensive line coming back, not just William Sanchez, who was the second teamer, um, all Mid South on that. What you're going to have to replace is Traylon Shepard. And while, yes, Nick Burge did run for 500 some odd yards and can definitely lead the charge next season, anytime that you're losing an almost 1,000-yard back, that is that's a big hairy deal to replace. That's not for nothing.
For sure. I think too with the triple option though, with Nick Burge coming back is big for them because it's a guy who's been in the system. You're usually able to plug and play if that offense is, what's the word I'm looking for? If they're kind of rolling, if they're getting comfortable with what they're doing. There are guys that if you're in that system for a year or two or three, can really be easy to plug in there. So I'm curious to see what they do. I think Nick will do a fantastic job for them, but it definitely is something to watch out for because you can't, like you said, you can't always replace 1,000-yard rusher that easily.
And you mentioned Luke Holloway's coming back, their starting quarterback. Honestly, that's the linchpin of any offense, but in a triple option, even more so as they're making that the decisions on where to go with the football. And you got to be quick, and having a returning guy like that is such a huge deal. But let's talk about the defense, where you've got one first teamer in Aaron Davis coming back, two second teamers in Jalen Brown and Derek Taylor that are coming back. That headlines a defense that is returning almost all of their contributors, not just starters, but contributors, anyone who had 10 tackles or more a year ago. You're returning almost all of those guys at every level of your defense.
Absolutely. And with the way this team has improved year over year, for what we've seen, this is a team to watch out for if you're one of these upper teams in the conference.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you combine triple option um, with a good defense, and that is a recipe for winning football. And we'll have to see, because the next team up had a great season last year, a team that Mid South coaches have been talking about and talking up for a few years. And, well, that's Campbellsville. And 44th in SP Plus with a 4-6 record is definitely something to write home about. It's a team who very much got it done offensively, um, but defensively improved 33 places. And anytime you can make that big of a jump on your defensive side, you're going to be putting together a good season.
For sure. And we're seeing a bit of consistency from this Campbellsville team. Being about par, obviously not that many spots separating your offense from defense, and SP plus is a huge bonus. Obviously, this offense is about where we expect them. Good quarterback, good receivers, but that defense taking the step up is huge for them. And not to mention, they do have an all-conference quarterback, your two wide receivers coming back, and an O lineman, first team all conference. It's huge. It's good to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we talked about it with Holloway, but getting Jagger Gillis back is huge. Anytime you can return a quarterback who did as well as Gillis did last year with, almost 3,000 yards Just needs to cut down on the turnovers, 28-14 touchdown to interception ratio. But that's a solid foundation. The top half of this division feels like it's going to be, or this entire division feels like it might be going topsy-turvy a little bit. Not that the top is going to become bottom and the bottom is going to become top. But these teams at the bottom, these three that we talked about between Faulkner and Campbellsville and Cumberland, are absolutely making strides with what they're bringing back. And they have they're going to put some of these top teams on notice. But Campbellsville does return almost all that offense from a year ago. And got to make sure you plug and play there on defense. But otherwise, you're going to have another good season ahead of you.
Absolutely.
And to continue the theme of long C names, we now come to Cumberlands of Kentucky, plural Cumberlands, unlike singular Cumberland of Tennessee. That one never trips anyone up. I can promise.
I'm glad we decided to put them in the same conference.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
good idea.
I mean, it's just like having two St. Francis's. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks in the same division of the same conference.
Yeah.
Both in states that start with I. Yeah. Never made that
Not
mistake.
confusing at all.
Never made that mistake. Talk about teams that have improved. That defense improved a lot last year, up 29 spots. Offense lagged behind a little bit, but again, in a year where offense reigned supreme, your yards per play actually went up, and you still went down in SP plus, and that defense caught a little bit there. So it was a tough year for Cumberland's. Cumberland's was my dark horse last year, and early on, I felt really good about myself. And then I stopped feeling very good about myself about midway through the season, unfortunately. But they do bring back a lot of pieces.
Yeah, they do. Obviously, bringing back a tight end is huge for your offense. And that defensive backfield with a first team and second team all conference DB coming back into Thornton and Byron's Mitchell are huge. This defense, I think, is in a good position to succeed. But I think it's important to note you don't have a lot of offensive pieces coming back. And for a Cumberland's team that is kind of in no man's land right now, this was a team a couple of years ago that was in the playoff, looked really good, was making, putting people on notice. And I think they would argue that the season they had last year was not the way they wanted it to go. They're definitely in an interesting position having to replace a lot of that offense that, well, did improve SP plus, you still fall some spots there. They're in a weird spot. They're right in the middle of this conference from where you look at last year. And with the teams coming up from behind them, they're in a bit of a precarious position.
Yeah, you're neither up nor down. To quote the old children's song, you're in the middle of the hill here. And I there's a part of me that doesn't know quite what to do with Cumberland's. But I trust their coaching staff that they've got there. Shan Housekeeper's a good coach. I've seen his defenses when he was defensive coordinator at Georgetown, puts together a whale of a squad there. Anytime you can have a really good defense, your offense can lag a little bit and it'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to the top half of the Mid-South, we will take a quick break and hear a word from our friends at AdCraft.
So you want to create and sell custom merch for your team or business. That's exciting, but where do you begin? How much inventory should you order? How do you distribute orders? AdCraft has your answers. Streamline the way you offer custom merch by utilizing our risk-free web store service. We ship directly to each customer, and we have the fastest turnaround in the game. Raise funds for your team or get merch to your employees and patrons. Contact AdCraft today, and let's bring your merch to life.
That is exactly what they do, and they are so very good at it. Year after year, they've supported us. Support the guys who support us, and go check out AdCraft today. Now, talked about a team that was a little bit confusing to me in Cumberland's. The next one up, it really does confuse me. and that's going to be Lindsey Wilson. And Matt, this is a team who they took care of business against some teams last year. They lost by 4 points at home against eventual national champion Kaiser. You take care of Bluefield. You take care of Campbellsville, Cumberland's. You lose a 10-0 game at Georgetown. You beat Cumberland's handily. You lose fairly big to Bethel. And the committee looks at your record and sees that you have not beat a top 25 team. And despite your stats against everyone else that you've beaten handily, those close games end up working against you. And I don't know, voting wise, Matt, last year, it was hard to figure out what to do with Lindsey.
It really was, because this, by all means, was still a top 10 team very easily, but you can't quite put them in that next tier up. And so it's a weird spot. I think this team, I don't want to say they've been bad. Obviously, SP Plus, they've been great. They've been really good for a long time. National champions just a few years ago. But I feel like since Cameron Dukes left, that's a name we haven't mentioned in a little bit. Like, this offense is very good, but it's not quite where we've seen it when they won the national championship. Defense is still fantastic. Like, and they're still getting it done on the offensive side of the ball. But when it comes to these top three teams in the Mid-South, you're right. It's very weird because I don't know exactly what to do with them.
Yeah, and the fact, and you losing to Kaiser at home early on last season, that's a toughie to deal with, and to kind of figure out how to fit that into your into your idea of who Lindsey Wilson was. Now, I will note they are going to be doing a little bit of go big or go home this next season as they start this season August 29th at Tex West. That is a go big or go home game, because you think about the rest of the schedule: at Point versus Bluefield versus St. Andrews, at Faulkner, at Cumberland's. Cumberland's could be ranked by then, I don't know. Versus Campbellsville, at Cumberland, and then you round out your season at home against Bethel and Georgetown.
Which those two games being at home benefits you a lot, for sure.
It does, but if you don't get that win against Tex West at Fort Worth, you might be in the same situation that you were last year. That game is so vital. Obviously we haven't previewed the Sooner yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, Tex West is a pretty good ball club. Yeah, they're breaking in a new head coach this year, with Joe Prudhomme stepping aside. But I mean, this is almost, oh man, you hate to call any game in August a must-win game.
Yeah,
but that kind of feels like one.
It really does, and it's a weird spot because obviously you want to encourage what we have been seeing a lot in the NAIA recently, where these teams are going across to different conferences and playing the best that they have to offer. But at the same time, you look at last year when you lose to Kaiser early in the year, it's not a bad loss to have on your resume, but it compounds with the other games you lost, and now it hurts you. Very similar situation with Texas Wesleyan. It's so hard because obviously playing Georgetown and Bethel at the end of the year is good for your schedule because you can really build some momentum, whether you win or lose that Texas Wesleyan game. But that's not something that we're going to see leave the minds of the voters in the committee, depending on how it goes, even with how early it is.
Yeah, because, I mean, we did see that Kaiser game come back, and I mean, they are definitely looking at those top 10, top 25, and receiving votes, win-loss records as ways to delineate. So even though Lindsey Wilson had a great season, was 6th in SP+, they don't get postseason football for the first time in a long time. And to compound this, you're losing Jabias Dawson. You're losing great pieces there with Theron Orr and Darius Willis on your defense. And yes, you do bring back a lot of pieces elsewhere, whether it be Ethan Cash at quarterback, and we talk about the quarterback and how important that is, and Logan Collier is a wide receiver, Quante Hicks is a receiver. This might be somewhat of an interesting year to see where that program is headed overall. Is this going to be a year where they bounce back and they show that last year was a little bit of a fluke and they can make it happen? Or if we start to see a little bit of slippage from the Blue Raiders?
Yeah, and I mean, being in a spot where saying a down year for you is going 8-3 and barely missing out on a playoff spot, like you're doing just fine. But it is with the top 3 teams of this conference, as you'll see when we go to the next 2 teams. It's brutal. It's so hard to be able to tell how this is going to go. This is the same conversation we've had the past couple of years in this conference. And Lindsey Wilson, while still being a very good football team, like could be in a precarious position again as they were last year.
Yeah, and they do. You do have a lot of holes to fill. It's not like you've got a most here. You've got a running back that was amazing last year, 1,009 yards and 13 touchdowns. Like we talked about at Cumberland, you just don't go off and replace a 1,000-yard running back. You only return about half of your defensive line. And if you can't win the war in the trenches against Georgetown and Bethel, you're sunk. Mm-hmm. This is a league that likes to have a balanced attack, but really prides itself on running the football. And as we'll see, Georgetown may have a pretty good running attack next year.
Yeah. If you don't recall, the Georgetown team under Darius Neal that, was averaging just about 7 yards a carry, 13th ranked offense, almost 6 yards per play on what was by all means a pretty one-dimensional offense. And I think if you talk to that staff, they would 100% agree.
Yeah, it was definitely the Darius Neal show, but it worked. They were up 42 spots on offense. Does not lie. They did fall back a couple of spots on defense, but in 22 they had an absolutely nasty defense. So I'm not going to crack on you too much for that. But it's a really good season for Georgetown. You go undefeated through the Mid-South, and that is hard to do. Returning, you have Darius Neal at running back, first-teamer. Blake Gossett, an All-American at center and a first-teamer in the Mid-South. Second-teamer Max Hill. And if you're returning your starting running back and 2 All-Conference, 1 All-American offensive lineman, you're going to be okay. But, yeah, as Chris Oliver said on the interview in the middle of the offseason, we've got to find a way to become more balanced. Because honestly, if you can find that passing game with your quarterback who's coming back for what feels like the 5th year in Garrick Slunaker, you could really have a nice season offensively.
Yeah, and this is a top 15 offense that had a quarterback that went for 14 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Not a fantastic TD to INT ratio.
Not at all.
But if that passing game improves even a little bit, you're going to be in a fantastic spot because people have seen the Darius Neal show now. They'll know how to prepare for it. But if you come out, you flip that 14-11 split to 17-9, 18-7, something like that with 2,000 plus yards, you're in a fantastic spot as a team. And not to mention, yes, this is a team in SP plus defensively that dropped a few spots, but it's hard to knock, like you said, a top 5 defense in the country and who is returning not a whole lot. You'll have to replace some spots there, but a linebacker core for sure that can get it done.
You do have to play Standiford there. Standiford's a really nice player. Obviously, Mags at wide receiver, tight end Jeremy Adams, more of a blocking guy, and Boots Elliott, an all-conference first teamer at offensive line. But if anyone's going to be able to put that back together, it's going to be Chris Oliver.
Absolutely.
On a defense that is going to be good. We know that for certain. Even though you only bring back half of it, and then we've talked about Lindsey Wilson's schedule, but check Georgetown's out. Your first game is August 29th at Montana Tech. Look, man, that's going to be a fun matchup. Montana Tech should be good. If I remember correctly, I want to say they're transitioning a head coach. I can't remember. It's been weeks since we did that Frontier pod. That was a good Montana Tech team.
Yep.
You go at Pikeville, at Alabama A&M. Get that money game there versus Reinhardt versus Faulkner at Cumberland versus Bethel versus Cumberland's at Campbellsville at Lindsey Wilson. So you do get a few games in between Bethel and Lindsey to where you can kind of heal up a little bit. Obviously, that's always an extremely physical contest between these three.
It's nice to feel like their schedule is spread out pretty evenly. Obviously, the trouble with Lindsey Wilson's is that it's so back heavy that, like, if you lose one of those games, like, there's a decent chance you lose the second, just because those are the two best teams in your conference. But being able to play Bethel about midway through the season, that bodes pretty well. And kind of building to that game against Lindsey Wilson will be good for them. I'm excited to watch this Georgetown team. I've been high on them for the past couple of years that we've been talking about the Mid-South. And that's not going to change. Chris Oliver's that guy. This team has improved under him already. Like, it's good things for them.
So we move on to our last team in the Mid-South. That's going to be the Bethel Wildcats. A very good season for Bethel under head coach Mike Jasper. Still the last NAIA product to have had his name called in the NFL draft. Number one in SP Plus. That is saying something. Not even the national champion was number one overall. Fourth ranked offense, first ranked defense. I mean, you're talking about an absolute high mark for the season. And we want to talk about the schedule now, or we want to talk about the schedule later? Because I definitely want to talk about the schedule.
Well, we could talk about the schedule in either spot, but I think we should start by mentioning that they are playing Mary Hardin Baylor to open their second game of the season, I believe.
At home.
At home. Which, for those who don't know, Mary Hardin Baylor is one of the most prestigious D3 programs of all time. Going to be an absolute slugfest. I am super excited to watch that one. That's going on one of the main screens that weekend.
There's one winner of that game, and that winner is Thomas University, who plays Bethel the next week, in Thomasville, Georgia. I am looking forward to so many of these coaches I haven't actually met in person. I have interacted with them online for years and years and years. Haven't gotten the chance to meet a whole bunch of them in person. I'm really looking forward to meeting Mike Jasper. And since he comes to my place, I get to do it. This is the year. I'm excited. But yeah, then you go at Bluefield versus at Cumberland, at Georgetown versus Campbellsville, at Lindsey versus Faulkner. So you have to play away against Lindsey and Georgetown. That is that's tough.
Yeah, that is tough.
And with one game in between.
Yeah. It's the Mid-South. I feel like these teams are used to it at this point.
Yeah. No, I know. So let's talk about what you've got coming back. You do have some nice pieces coming back. Avant Burris, a couple offensive linemen in Davis and Morales, a couple of nice defensive pieces in Darian Lewis and Javante Carter, and obviously your kicker, Andrew Welch. But the big news here is who's moving on, because that is a laundry list. And look, when you lose J.D. Dixon and Joaquin Colazo in the same season, and you have coming back what you've got, if Bethel ends up just absolutely crushing everyone's skull this year, or even if they're well above average in winning the Mid-South, then obviously Mike Jasper's Coach of the Year with what you've got that is not returning. The fact that you're going to be able to fill all these holes.
Which is such a crazy thing to say about the team that was number one in SP Plus last year. But it's true. They are gonna have so many spots to fill. I feel like Colazo's been there forever, literally been the heart and soul of that offense for a long time now. And you have so many pieces to replace. We didn't even mention Jalen Taylor, who's another first team all conference guy who's not coming back at your other wide receiver spot. The defense is going to be just fine. I'm confident in that. They have enough coming back to work with. But man, that offense, you're going to have to figure stuff out pretty quickly. And this is a great staff. I think it's in place for them to do so. But I got to see it. You got to show me. I think Lindsey Wilson's also in that category. But also Bethel, we don't know if they're like a reload team. We don't know if they're up there yet with the Northwesterns and the Morningsides and how we talk about Georgetown and Lindsey Wilson. Like, usually there are guys who are cycling through that you haven't heard of or have seen little of that are able to get the job done. We don't know if Bethel is that kind of program. We haven't seen enough out of them to know. So I'm very curious to see offensively what they're able to get done.
Yeah, and this will be a testament to what they've been doing on the recruiting trail the last 4 years if they've been able to sell their program. So yeah, now would be a great time to buy in on Bethel. Because you're going to be possibly buying a dip, and if you're going to say that you think that they're going to be amazing, then you're going to look like a genius if it turns out good. But it's again, it's a put up or shut up year for Bethel as well. A little bit of show me what you've got in terms of your program. But how do we feel? Who are we picking, Matt? Who are you taking it to win this one?
When I look at these top three teams in the conference, they're very similar in how they're composed and how they've been the last few years with very good defenses, offenses slightly behind, but still very good. So I have to compare the floors of these teams because I feel like their ceilings are pretty undefined with the pieces they have to fill. And I feel like Georgetown's floor is the highest currently. Obviously, I could be very wrong. These teams are so close that like you can interchange any three of them, and I wouldn't have a complaint about that choice. I think Georgetown is the one to get it done. I think because their pass game has so much room for improvement, despite how successful they were last year. Like I said, even a little bit of improvement, and you're looking at a top 10 offense in the country. And to boot, your defense should be still pretty solid, top 15, top 10 as well. That's a recipe for success.
All right, so let me kind of walk through my process here. Faulkner, Cumberland, Campbellsville, all should be very much improved. But you've got teams that are 63rd, 48th, and 44th.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you improve and you make it into the low 20s, high 30s, that's not enough.
No.
Cumberland's is in that liminal space between. And I'm not sold on where they're at. Even if they do improve, you're looking at a 20th or so. Lindsey Wilson, Georgetown, and Bethel were 6, 5, and 1 last year. There is no way that they fall enough to the space could close, but the two worlds aren't going to overlap, I don't think. I could be absolutely wrong, but I just don't think that there's enough weirdness going on at these top three schools. So that limits me down to Lindsey, Georgetown, and Bethel. With what Bethel's got coming back, it's gonna be a toughie for them. both Lindsay and Georgetown have fantastic coaching staffs and have enough pieces coming back to make a run. But Georgetown has a luxury right now that Lindsay doesn't have, and that's a proven running back. All else fails, and everything just stinks to high heaven. Chris Oliver can just give the ball to Darius Neal, and there's going to be a certain level of success that they're going to have with running the football. I don't see right now from either of the other two top teams where they have that to fall back on. Now, my dark horse is Cumberland, and I will chalk my bulletin board material. I will put it up here for all to see, and that is, I think Cumberland ends the 2024 season as the fourth best team in the Mid-South. And I think you see, honestly, I think you see Campbellsville number 5. I think you do see that switch there for right now, at least. You're not going to keep Cumberland's down forever. But right now, I do think that Cumberland has the personnel to make life very difficult for that bottom half and to show up and show out in the Mid-South.
Can't say I really disagree with you. I'm also taking Cumberland as my dark horse. I think returning all that you do on offense in a system that everybody's familiar with in the triple option, which can also give people problems. If it's run well, I played against Stork for 4 years. I know what that is like. When it clicks, it's horrifying. And not to mention, pretty much all of your top, 40, top 30 defense is coming back. A defensive unit that caused problems for people even last year. It's hard for me to look at the other teams behind the top 3 and give it to anybody else. I just think Cumberland is on a roll. I think their trajectory is good, and I really like the pieces they have coming back.
So we've talked up, down, and sideways about everyone in the Mid-South. So what does that mean then for our conference power ranking? Now remember, we do have 5 teams to go. These are not final. But right now, the Mid-South has come out on top by a fairly sizable margin. 9, almost 10 spots clear of the KCAC Kessinger, who honestly had a really good season last year. I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with the Mid-States Mid-East and figure out how to do that and pull out some of the historical data and transfer it to the Midwest as the teams have moved around. So my math might not be perfect because obviously one huge tenet of who's best overall is how you've done historically. See the SEC. And so the Mid-South right now is atop in this year's SP Plus, just straight average. Now, they do fall number 2 in standard deviation because that 16.472 standard deviation for the Bissell division of the KCAC is absolutely insane. That is, by and large, that will probably stay up there as the number 1 standard deviation. I'd be shocked if there was anything better than 16.
Yeah.
Mid-South's number 2 there. And so when we look at overall Mid-South average strength with your historical data is 2. Been doing historical data throughout this, so don't at me. But yeah, that puts the Frontier back. And honestly, you look at Mid-South Frontier, 2 and 2.875. They're fairly close. There's a bit of gap between 2.875 and 4.1. About a 1.33 point gap between the Frontier and the KCAC Kessinger, which is it's about what we kind of figured for this point in the process.
Yeah, for sure. It's still interesting to see all the numbers laid out because I like to do narrative ball, so I never like this part of the show. Unfortunately for my beloved GPAC, they are fourth, still pretty good. But it's a lot of competitive football. I feel like a lot of the conferences in the NAIA have just stepped up their game since we started covering them.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that is the case. And I mean, look, Kessinger fans, you can go to your GPAC brethren and puff your chest a little bit because that's insane. And for however long that lasts, because you think about it, that includes a Morningside team who's really down last year. Morningside's being a boat anchor to the GPAC. How many times do you get to say that sentence?
Not many, if at all, ever.
I'm sorry, Steve Ryan. I'll probably hear that one again. But yeah, so right now and we'll see what the Mideast, Midwest have to say about that, about the Mid-South's reign. But that might be your winner right there. That's an insane score. But that is going to be it for the NAIA F-Ball podcast this week. It's when we're taping this, it's June 30th. It's dang near July, and
sneaking up on us.
July is going to be here before you know it. And Matt, we're 2 months away.
We're real close.
We're 2 months away. I think we can make it.
Real close.
I think we can do it. I think we can do it. It's been a long off season, but we couldn't do any of this off season or in season without our patrons. They are the best. If you want to support what we're doing with NAIA football, please join us and become a patron of our page. Like I said, it's the best way to support our work. Only $1 a month, $3 if you're feeling generous. And it really does help to improve what we're able to do and the quality that we're able to put out. Is definitely tied to this. The green screen behind me is patron purchased. What we're able to do is tied so in with this. But our patrons are DSU Cone, Bob Boone, Roger Meyer, Jeremy Vobble, Fred Christensen, Jerry Quickle, Ace Wellen, Brett, Marty Seabolt, Nick Ryan, Hayden Frigno, Kyle Gregory, Tyler Pierce, Justin Hoffman, Steve Speakman, Brian Shake, who is definitely happy with our picks, Julianne Shager, Nate Soapbeer, who, Matt, I don't know if you saw it, but that our friend Rowdy Raven, Nate Soapbeer, our man's engaged. Congratulations, Nate.
Congrats to him, dude. Holy cow.
Love it. Stephen Cutler, Julie Loud, Dale Norton, Nathan Moore, Dylan Gonzalez, Ryan, Jason Crawford, Dustin Wilkie, Charles A. Flowers, Todd Nick, Sean Chamberlain, Debbie, Zach Lance, and Josue Trujillo. And that'll do it for another NAIF Ball podcast. We are so psyched to be in the back half of these teams, and it's gonna be fun coming down the stretch. Doing hopefully get another state of the sport chat with the home office again. Looking to get that on the books and do that in a whole preview, and we'll be ready to cover a paint bucket game.
Real ball.
The last all NAIA paint bucket game.
Oh, wow.
Yikes. I just, that just hit me and that hurts. But until then, we will see y'all on the Twitter feed. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the NAIF Ball Podcast, powered by AdCraft USA. Be sure to contact them for all your custom apparel, merch, and uniform needs. Thanks also to our newest sponsor, Telemetry Sports. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to the podcast and to our YouTube channel, and leave us a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. As always, if you'd like to support what we do, Head over to patreon.com/NAIAFball and become a patron. We can't do what we do without our sponsors and listeners like you.